Welcome back to the Southeastern Connecticut Metal Podcast. This is our second episode today. Our guest is Death Metal Bob, the famous Death Metal Bob, also known as DMB. And we're going to go back and dissect Connecticut death metal over the last 20 plus years. And we have some really obscure bands and songs that we're going to play later today. I'm trying to secure Casting Shadows as my next band for an interview. They've been elusive because they are so popular and famous and have a lot going on, and I got to deal with their publicists and their agents and their label and all this stuff. But eventually I will get them in here. That's the plan. But until then, we have today's episode with DMB. If you are interested in seeing somebody appear on the show, a band or somebody that you think should be interviewed, or if you know bands whose songs you would like to have played on the show, just let me know. You can find me easily enough on Facebook. But here we go. This is our interview with Death Metal Bob, DMB. All right, and we're back with the Southeastern Connecticut Metal Podcast, and I have an esteemed guest today, one that I'm sure everyone knows about, but I have the great Death Metal Bob. Death Metal Bob, how are we doing today?
Welcome to the show.
All right, little DMB for you here. DMB, this is your first time on the show. Just want to ask you a couple questions just to clarify for the listeners, who you are and where you're coming from, right? How long have you been listening to metal? And I know this is going to give away your age, but how long have you been into the metal thing?
As long back as I can remember, living in Pequannock Bridge, for us in New England will recognize that dump. My brothers were listening to metal of all kinds. Back then, you got to remember, it was all just kind of called metal or rock and roll. We didn't have all these genres and whatnot. So you'll catch me a lot of times calling, anything metal. That's death metal, black metal, etc. At 42 years old now, I've been listening to metal for at least 35 years.
Yeah.
But as I said, what we would call death metal now is a whole different ballgame from what we would call metal or death metal back then. Back then, there was no death metal per se. We had watched it grow up, as I'm sure you did.
Right. And kind of an interesting thing, a lot of people get annoyed by the excessive labeling of subgenres within metal. Oh, this is technical death metal. Oh, this is symphonic black metal, this is hardcore death metal, black rock and roll, whatever. What do you think about that? Because some people just say it's metal, just listen to it.
You'll never hear me being one of them guys arguing, hey, listen to this, it's some great metal, and I'm going to say, no, that's grindcore, that's black metal, you won't hear me doing that. I don't think it's a disservice to the music. I think no matter how deep you are into metal, or as we're saying, death metal, you have to be into it all to understand it. And I understand, where people want to get politically correct with the genre. It's not that important for me.
I agree, but at the same time, I am one of those guys that likes to categorize, because I just think it makes it easier sometimes if you're trying to describe a band to somebody that they haven't heard. Are you going to call Behemoth and Blind Guardian metal? So sometimes,
fair point.
Sometimes you have to do that. But I've seen a lot of arguments online where people are like, it's just metal, just listen to it, it's good. Well, the truth is that most of it's not good. But I think it's helpful to sometimes. And honestly, for myself, I will disqualify an entire subgenre sometimes. Like if you tell me something is symphonic, I'm out. I don't care.
I would agree with that. A lot.
I just know that I'm not going to like it. Or if you tell me that it's metalcore, I'm not going to like it.
I would agree with that as far as grindcore goes.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody came up to me and said, oh, I don't know, a band you just actually introduced me to said, hey, Incantation is grindcore, I could say, no, it isn't. And they could say, yes, it is. And technically it isn't, but kind of it is.
No, they'd be wrong.
It's where people start arguing the fine little nuances of what is and isn't. And that's where I come out the end. It's all just metal.
Yeah. But if anyone ever said Incantation is anything but pure death metal, pure, perfectly created death metal, then they would be wrong. But anyway, let's move on a little bit. So a question for you, and this is going to be a hard one because these questions are hard for me, but your top 5 death metal bands? Is this something you think about? You ever put thought to?
Top 5's hard because and I know this is not one of your favorites, but they just brought me to the game so many times originally, and for the long run, I'm always going to love Cannibal Corpse. Now, without getting into the who's better, Corpse Grinder or Chris Barnes argument.
You could like them both. Why can't you like them both?
Exactly. And just out of the love for Chris Barnes, I'm going to go ahead and like his band 6 Feet Under, and I'm going to put that on one of my favorites. So there's 2 already. And I understand what everybody may say about.
Now hold on a second.
About 6 Feet Under.
Hold on, 6 Feet Under though, is that death metal or is it death and roll? Because we need to stratify here. No, I'll take it. It's death metal.
I will put that in death metal all day.
Anything Chris Barnes is doing is
and that's exactly my point. Anything he brings to the game is death metal. Unless you're putting it under some harmonica, it's death metal. And even then, maybe
even then, yeah.
Where are we? So I would have to put, and this is a relatively newer band, I would definitely have to put Dying Fetus on there. I just really love what they're doing.
Yeah, newer, but that's because you're old.
Agreed.
They've been around a long time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as far as anywhere else, it kind of varies. I mean, I do like Napalm Death, but I kind of find that lyrically, it's a little stale and
political.
Vocally, it's a little stale. I mean, I can get bored of it at the same time as listening to it. Where are we? 4 or 5? I guess I would have to. Did I put Obituary on there yet?
Oh, the great Obituary.
I'm not sure 10's enough. And at the beginning, I wouldn't consider Obituary death metal. It was back when I was listening to more of a Overkill and an Iron Maiden type thing.
Yeah.
And at the time, they kind of broke me in maybe a little teeny bit.
Yeah, even today, Obituary is not the Cookie Monster vocals. You don't have the typical, they're not very blasty, but Obituary is death metal. It just goes to show that, death metal can mean different things and still be death. And they've always just done their own thing, and I've always liked that about them. When all the other bands were trying to get as technical and as fast and as crazy as possible, they just kept doing what they were good at, and I respect that about them.
Well, I think the power of the 6-string guitar, I mean, it speaks for itself with a lot of bands. Obituary is a great example of that. You throw any type of good vocals to that, and that's probably what'll always bring me to metal, not just the angry lyrics or the disapproval with the government, etc., whatever.
Right. And there's so many things that can, I mean, there's like gore death metal, there's politically minded death metal, there's all different sorts of lyrical content, evil, satanic death metal, of course. But anyway, so my plan for today was to get some Connecticut death metal bands from over the years, maybe some lesser known ones, and to have us listen to them and kind of comment on them as we go through, because we've both been into death metal for well over 20 years, and we might have some opinions on these bands. Does that sound good?
Excellent.
All right, here we go. Let's get started. All right, we're going to start with a band that I had actually never heard of. I did a search for Connecticut death metal, and this band came up, and this is Atrocity, of course, not to be confused with the German death metal band Atrocity. And I sent this over to you so you could hear it early. What I immediately like about this, before I even heard the music, was the tape cover. So if you look them up on YouTube, the demo we're looking at is called Toxic Death by Atrocity, and you could tell that the cover was drawn by a kid in high school in the mid-'80s, because this tape came out in 1985. Do you have any opinions on the cover here?
Well, I must say, immediately when you had said Atrocity, I had to think back, was it this Atrocity or the other Atrocity? And I'm still not sure in my head. I have to say the tape case, the artwork, it brings me back. It's so indicative of the early times where, as you said, a high school kid with a passion. I'll do the artwork on the tape. And a lot of times a kid's a genius and we get something like what we have here, and it's just beautiful.
All of my notebooks look like this. All of my social studies book covers and everything were just covered in this stuff. But here we go. We're going to start with Atrocity from Connecticut, and we'll do maybe part of the first song off of Toxic Death. You can hear that tape hiss right away.
I like that bass.
Lots of reverb. They loved reverb in the 80s. fast. See, because you're so old and you lived through the 80s, you remember when there was a fine line between thrash and death metal. It wasn't like one day you were listening to Slayer and the next day it was Deicide. It was thrash, and I think the first thing that really changed were the vocals, right?
Absolutely. And I think, as I was saying earlier, that's kind of one of the things that changes for you. You like the sound, you like the power of it, and then something comes up with a little bit harder voice, and maybe it's tuned to a low D and your sixth string's tuned to a high E, and the guy's yelling a little louder. It always is going to make it a little more meaty for you, especially when you're trying to rebel like so many were.
And one thing that's really respectable about this, and again, I had never heard of this band, but when did Possessed come out with Seven Churches, right? Because that's sort of acknowledged as like the real beginning of death metal. And this is from 1985. It must have been right around that time.
Well, you got to figure back then, especially around here, we were getting demos, once again, with artwork like this, from, say, California or whatever, and that was pretty much our link to metal, to death metal, to anything in the early days. Just like in the very first metal onslaught where it came.
Yeah, there was no YouTube, there was no social media.
True. You had to really love it to be good at it and to do it.
You had to look for fanzines and stuff. The recording is pretty good too. It's especially for 1985. I mean, I had bands that I was in the 90s that put out demos that sounded much worse than this.
Well, right, so many bands that may or may not have been great were killed by the crappy re-recording at the demo. And this one's not bad. A big one for me is when you can hear the sixth string, you can't hear anything else. You can't hear the vocals, etc.
Right. That's not true here. The vocals are pretty prominent.
It was very melodic. I like it.
You got to think these kids were 17 or 18, Well, that's the first song. Again, what you expect of thrash turning into death metal, and I think what would qualify what we just heard as death metal were the vocals, and the guitars were pretty non-melodic, right? But yeah, the production was good. I would recommend to anybody who's into that old school death metal, Possessed era stuff to check this out. Atrocity, Toxic Death.
Very good listen and well worth the artwork.
All right, let's see. What are we gonna do next? Oh, cool. We have a caller. This is the first time we've ever had a caller here on the show. Hello.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt your show.
No, we like callers. This is great.
I can't. Who is this death metal Bob guy think he is? This is nonsense.
Who does death metal Bob?
Everything the guy says. Just everything the guy says.
Don't you ever talk bad about death metal Bob. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't you ever call this show and talk bad about it.
This guy clearly don't know I'm a white belt. He clearly don't know I'm a white belt.
Don't you ever talk bad about death metal Bob. DMB has done more in his death metal life than you'll ever do with your life.
I find that hard to believe.
You're despicable.
No,
what have you done?
I thought that you knew what you were talking about.
What have you done?
And then next thing you know,
what
you're
have you
defending
done?
death metal Bob.
You'll do nothing.
Is the music at least good though?
I'm done. I'm sick of this guy. I'm done with him.
You know what? I'm done too.
Yeah. Thanks for calling in, pal. Real great. Real nice. Don't you ever talk about DMB. Don't ever.
I was promised a comfortable environment, and this is what I walk into.
Boy, that was jerky. I mean,
am I in danger of leaving this podcast, or am I good?
No, that was just. I mean, some people just think they know everything. But anyway, let's get on to our next
guy. Probably like Tesla, but what are you gonna do?
He probably does. He's probably a Tesla guy. Let's get on to our next song, which is going to be "Shrine of Desecration" by Evilution. All right, so DMB, we have Shrine of Desecration by Evilution.
Right about 1997. More of our favorite artwork, a little more refined.
You
but
pointed
still.
out, I had forgotten about this, that they were on what label?
They were on Jamie Josta's label, Stillborn.
Stillborn, that's right. And I had forgotten about that because Jamie, Hatebreed is known for being a hardcore band that is kind of more mainstream metal now. Not everyone knows he's a huge death metal fan. Always has been. I remember him putting on shows at the LNG with Jungle Rot and...
Oh, great. Me too. I've seen him live several times. I actually seen him at Suffolk's Downs and Tattoos the Earth, and he put a great show on. People could say what they want about him. Live, Hatebreed's a great band.
You know what was really cool? One time, it might have been the same show. It was at the LNG, and Hatebreed was playing, and he had booked all death metal bands. And when Hatebreed played their set, it was before Hatebreed had gotten really big. I swear he sang the whole set death metal. It was awesome because I think he was trying to get the death metal kids to buy Hatebreed stuff.
For sure.
But it was actually sounded really good. But
He
anyway,
has vocal range. He definitely does.
Yeah, and he always had that distinct sound. But anyway, Evilution.
But I love these guys.
I saw these guys twice in the 90s. They weren't around that long. Yeah, they were. I remember their singer had an incredibly low voice. You could hear it here.
Oh, you can hear a broadcast. This is a voice made for a PA. This will carry to thousands and hundreds of thousands of people over a PA.
I like this part. This part has some groove to it. It's got some Connecticut to it right here. Yeah, I never, I don't think death metal's ever, Connecticut hasn't exactly been known for death metal. We're no Tampa or anything, and Tyrant Trooper, you hear that name a lot when you think about death metal in Connecticut. Somehow these guys got overshadowed, but for the mid '90s, this is as good as a lot of the stuff that was coming out on Roadrunner and Earache and that whole '90s generation of death metal.
For sure. It's funny you mentioned Roadrunner because they're kind of the problem. We never heard of Evilution. They were putting a lot of music down our throats, good and bad.
Yeah, that's for sure. But this is technical, really heavy, fast. They incorporate a lot of dynamics, fast and slow.
I need it fast for me. It's got to be fast paced.
Do it, yeah.
And it's got to be
I'm
thick
different.
vocals. The vocals got to be thick and mean.
I love.
That's
slow.
probably my biggest change, my biggest evolution in music. I went from the screamier voice to the thicker, deeper voice.
Yeah, this is good stuff. Good guitar work.
These guys practiced a lot. You can tell they're tight.
The artwork, not to at all compare it to the last band we were talking about, but another hand drawn piece of artwork here.
You can see the progression in it.
It's pretty good.
Dare I say a little bit of Slayer, little bit of that kind of look in there maybe.
And all their lyrics are very anti-religious, blasphemous kind of stuff.
I must say that's always enough to pull me in.
that does it for you? What do you think about Christian death metal?
I won't give it a fair listen. It's kind of like Grateful Dead. I won't give it the fair listen it deserves.
Yeah.
Maybe it's good. I don't know.
I've never heard good Christian death metal. I mean, I think it could be done. Because if you were a Christian death metal band and you sang about Old Testament stuff, that's pretty grim stuff.
For sure.
It could work,
Sure.
But
right, you'd have to take it on that. You'd have to take it on the actual old religious history that they kind of cover up.
But I don't think I've ever heard anything that I could remember. But anyway, this is Shrine of Desecration from Evilution.
Very, very good. Very tight. Very melodic. Real good.
Off their CD.
If you're not hearing this, you need to find this.
And this track on YouTube has 2 comments. That should tell you about how unknown these guys were. And I think that sucks because they were definitely good.
If Jamie Josta thought these guys were good.
Right. He's got that Josta business mind.
Right.
He doesn't get behind stuff he doesn't believe in. But anyway, okay, so let's move on to our next track. This is this band's been around for over 20 years and I still don't know how to pronounce their name. Capharnaum.
Capharnaum, that's me saying this. I don't know. I would go with your saying first over mine. Capharnaum is what I would believe it to be, what I believed it to be.
So you brought this up, and rightfully so, that this band is basically out of Florida now, but they weren't always. And I actually have a story about this. I went into Daddy's Junkie Music in West Hartford, 1996. 97, and I was looking for stuff, and I went into the guitar area, and there was a kid in a wheelchair playing guitar, and he was shredding. He was a total death metal, you could tell. He was just shredding, and I didn't want to stare because I thought he maybe thought I was looking at his chair, but he was shredding on guitar. And I'm like, this kid is something else. And then I don't know, maybe a year later, I was at a show, and the band Capharnaum played. And their logo was a guy in a wheelchair, and little did I know that was Jason Sukoff, who now in the metal world is pretty famous. He's a producer, and he's done all sorts of production work for a bunch of different bands. And Capharnaum is still playing. And who sings for them now?
His brother Jaden in the band, if I'm not mistaken. Correct?
Maybe
Jaden Sukoff, I believe is his name. I could be wrong on that. The two J's. And we have the singer was Matt.
Oh, the guy from Trivium.
Yes.
And
Matt Heavey.
I think he even pulled in the guy from All That Remains. What was his name? He sang for Shadows Fall for a little. Phil Labonte.
Oh, really?
I think he pulled him in for one or two tracks. I remember hearing that way back in the day. I hate Trivium, and I hate All That Remains. But those guys are good vocalists. They have good range and stuff. And if you look up the stuff that Capharnaum has done since then, we're going to play an early track from 97, but it's really good stuff. And it is more on the death metal side than metalcore or deathcore or whatever. But now we're going to start with Capharnaum. This is Eternal Descent off of the album Reality Only Fantasized with guitarist Jason Sukoff.
Amigo, if there is something going on, you will go home in the trunks of 10 different cars.
Was that Clint Eastwood movie there?
I don't know what that was. I didn't recognize that.
I believe so, for a few dollars more, but anyway.
Oh, nice 90s death metal vocal right there.
Yeah, you gotta love when they prime up.
There's something different about 90s death metal vocals. Now they're a lot more refined. I think there's a lot more technique. People go to vocal coaches to learn how to growl now, but back then it was just real,
Well, back then you taught yourself in front of the mirror, in the shower, in the car, wherever. So by the time you got it, you got it.
Very technical. And that's what I remember about him in the guitar store.
You can tell the different influence on the guitarist completely.
There's some suffocation in here. Technical, multiple time signatures. Harmony.
For sure.
This is a little Maiden-y right here, not bad.
It is. You can't beat that. Maiden
DMB
told the story every time.
The DMB loves some Maiden. D-beat.
Very impressive.
And these guys would have been young back then too. 18, 19. Always impressive to me when young guys can play like this, but also depressive because I'm almost 40 and I can't.
Very true.
I've been playing guitar for 20 years, but I've just been repeating the same year for 20 years. I never got better.
My brother's been playing for at least 38 years, and I would say he's great. He would say he's decent, and I don't know which one of us is right, but like you were just saying, going to the days where we kick on our distortion and we pinch a bunch of bars. It's not going to work anymore. Very clean sound. I love this.
Yeah, good production. I wonder if
they see the end in sight. They know exactly where they're going. Well set up.
I wonder if Sukoff produced this himself. He just seems like, he was able to make this his life and his career. Not many people could say that, and this era where the music industry is just kind of falling apart. But you could tell he was just one of those dedicated people that just every waking moment had a guitar in his hand, you know?
Well, it's another great example of these guys should have been so much more famous.
Yeah. It's cool that he's still doing it with different people. He's also in, Sukov is in Char Walls of the Damned. You know them? With Richard Christie and Ripper Owens.
So he's in quite a few projects.
Yeah. Little synth here, little keyboard in the background. I usually don't like that, but I'll tolerate
When it's done right.
Yeah, like they don't have that all the way throughout their entire album, it seems like. So I guess. Oh, and it's gone. I'll take it. Again, this is Eternal Descent off of Reality Only Fantasized by Capharnaum.
Very good. Capharnaum. Very good stuff.
Oh, we have another caller. Here we go. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, Death Metal Bob. Death Metal Bob, you suck.
Hey,
you don't know anything.
don't you start with Death Metal Bob. He's a saint. He's a saint. You don't know Death Metal Bob. You don't know what you're talking about. Leave him alone. Death Metal Bob is a saint. He knows about death. What do you know? What do you know? Nobody likes you. Nobody just get.
You promised me a stable, comfortable environment.
I
And this
apologize,
guy-
DMB.
You can't. Your phone don't have blocks, sir.
It's just
You can't block
it's
this
just
guy?
very, very unprofessional of me. I just don't know who this person is.
Who
Why
is this
anybody?
bozo?
It's just why anybody would come out against Death Metal Bob in such a strong way makes no sense to me whatsoever. But anyway, so let's get into our next one here. This band is called Sacriphant or Sacriphant. The track is Dead in My Eyes. This looks to have come out also in the 90s, in the late 90s, 98. I'm just looking up some stuff on them now. Members of a bunch of bands I've never heard of. But anyway, here we go. Sacriphant.
Out of Clinton, Connecticut.
Starting off kind of slow. Production on this is lesser. I mean, I guess I don't want to compare this to Capharnaum, which was professional, but this is definitely like maybe demo quality.
The slow build-up.
Get that hardcore beat in the background. Kind of muddy. Not bad, though. I mean, sometimes you want your death metal to be underproduced, right? I think. I don't like it when it's too pristine.
I think it all goes with the vocals. If you got the deep, thick, crunchy vocals, then yeah, you want it to be a little unscrubbed, sure.
Yeah. Last beat. So he's going. There's some lows in here, but there's a lot of highs. There's more screaming than the low stuff that DMB likes.
One of the absolute, for me, faux pas with metal is having the really happy and then the down. That is the destruction of all that is metal for me.
Yeah. When you say that, do you mean like the melodic auto-tune?
No. I mean specifically, and not specifically, but for the point specifically, two singers. And one, blah, 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 sings like this, and he's happy, and then the other is pissed.
Yeah.
The end of it. This, where there's a range, okay, fine.
All right, that was Dead in My Eyes by Sacriphant
Very raw.
off their demo. To get back to your point there about it, going up and down and happy and stuff, that's one of my big criticisms of metalcore. I think metalcore is really got commercial, and that hurt it, but it became so formulaic that a lot of these bands, which were ostensibly hardcore or death metal bands originally, as they matured and they started to get on the radio and they started to get some commercial success, you could basically take any of this is my formula for any of those bands, and tell me if you think I'm wrong with this, right? In Flames plus Meshuggah plus Hatebreed plus Justin Bieber choruses. I think that's what it is.
It's a recipe, as we were talking about before with the 80s hair metal.
It's a recipe. And All That Remains, right? We mentioned them before with Phil Labonte, right? I think they're like the epitome of this. Double bass intro, verse, fast, blast beat, screaming, angry. And then, boom, hits the chorus, and it's this multi-layered, harmonic, melodined vocal that girls like, right? So it's almost like they're trying to market to everybody. Like in the beginning, oh, this is heavy, I like it. I'm a metal guy, I like it. And then it gets really pretty for a while, and really like hooky and memorable, and then it goes back to heavy again. And it's like they're trying to catch everybody, And to me, that alienates me. I just don't like that.
In today's age of concerts and venues and mega shows, they build you up, the guy's all mad in the audience, and then they go to that melodic part, and that's usually where the guy says, hey honey, you want a beer? And they hit the beer lines and stuff. So hey, maybe it's all part of the scam, who knows?
Might be. All I knew is bands like that they're literally getting radio play, which you could see as good because it means metal is on the radio.
But it also means, hey, let's mix every sound possible and throw it on the radio, and that's a big problem with the radio.
Yeah, and I don't like any of that stuff. I just give me something underground. Speaking of underground, going back into the 90s here, this is a band called Cyberchrist, and I remember seeing them a few times at the Tune-In one time. They were from Danbury, so the other side of the state from where we are. But 90s death metal band. This is Cyberchrist with Impressions of Hate from the album Impressions of Hate. This was a CD. I looked this up on YouTube, and they have a picture of the CD here.
You said this was 98?
96.
96.
Starting with some like... something Gregorian chants or something, some churchy stuff.
Some sort of monks in the background.
Their the artwork here has the 7 deadly sins. It looks like maybe this is some of that Christian death metal. Cyberchrist. I don't know. I doubt it.
It has to be Masonic or Christian.
Here we go. Well, pretty technical. The production is about what you would expect from like a young death metal band in the 90s. Like, it's not super clean, but you can hear what's happening. Pretty techy for the times.
Clean.
Here we go. The verse is kind of hardcore sounding.
Their sound mixer does excellent. That's actually really clean.
Yeah, they're really mixing up their drum beats here.
I must admit, I've not heard Cyberchrist, and I like it.
Yeah, even back then they weren't like I saw the guys around and saw them play a few times, but they were never huge. They would open for, when death metal tours came through. I think they were a go-to opening band. These guys incorporate a lot of groove. Probably not in the same way that a lot of those New York style slam death metal bands did, but yeah, I sense some hardcore influence here.
Not to lessen anybody's talents, but it's almost an easier style. As I was saying earlier, almost like barring everything.
And when I say, hardcore influence, I don't mean like this current day deathcore stuff that's going on, which to me is just one shade better than metalcore, but pretty aggressive sounding. Can't tell what the lyrics are about.
Yeah, that's getting me right now. I enjoy it. I'll definitely give this another listen, as it is, like I said, the first time I've heard this. Almost sounds a little 12-ton sludgy a little bit.
This guy, yeah, more of a. This sounds very 90s right here.
I would put these.
rhythm.
They sound like 12-ton sludge to me. Very 90s band. Very, very, very 90s
Yeah,
band.
and not the 90s is a bad thing. I think the golden era of death metal was the 90s.
No, that's what I think as well as you. We realized what we really liked. I thought this was going to be a little more Christian-y and, dare I say, lame. Not bad.
Got some echo there on the end. All right, well, that was
Gotta have the
Cyberchrist with Impressions of Hate off the same title of their album. All right, moving on. We got 3 songs left here. We're getting a little bit newer. This one looks to have come out in 2014, so that's a big jump from 1996. And this is a band called Animal Schoolbus, and the thing about them is they have a bit of a gimmick going on. Their singer is 2. It's a 2-year-old girl.
I've heard a little bit about this band, and they're amazing. Anybody that hasn't heard them, I mean, get out, get this CD.
Animal Schoolbus. I wonder if they play out live. That must be hard with a 2-year-old. I know. But anyway, this is Mommy's Car is Blue by Animal Schoolbus from the album Going to Grammy's House. She's a 2-year-old, but she's got growl
Very
to her.
clean.
You can tell it's a kid, but like... she's got
No,
some
I'd say
rasp.
that's at least an 18-year-old girl. There's no way that's a kid.
She's got some rasp on her. It's pretty good. Fast stuff. They...
Listen, that is definitely 100% Connecticut death metal.
They claim some grindcore influence. I heard a little Carcass in there, but yeah, that was interesting. Animal Schoolbus, Mommy's Car is Blue. It is kind of grindy because the song is 29 seconds.
I just got the pun there, by the way. A little Carcass in there. Get it? Animal Schoolbus.
Yeah, I get it. All right, so this is a band that I had actually never heard of, but you have.
Love them.
Called Xenosis, and they're a newer band. I don't know where they're from.
I'm embarrassed to say I'm not a regular of these guys, but what I know about them, I totally love. They are from New Haven, Connecticut.
And they consider themselves progressive death metal.
I believe Red Waves is off Sowing the Seeds of Destruction. I'm not sure if Turn Over the Crown is on that same album, but that is a great tune as well. Side note for you people out there.
And if you want to look them up, it's Xenosis with an X, Xenosis. But this is the track Red Waves. Starting with vocals right away.
Right away you notice deep, clean instrument sound. I always love that.
Yeah, good production. I think that's a... Because in the 90s, there wasn't digital production, right? So a lot of those other the stuff that we just listened to, the Cyberchrist and Sacriphant, whatever, that was DAT tape. You know, that's why you hear that hiss. And I don't mind the hiss. The hiss sounds good to me sometimes.
Well, it's like my brother would say, it's like they're playing In a Tornado on a trampoline.
Yeah. Which, yeah, it's somewhat appropriate for the style. Yeah, these guys are mixing up their time signatures. I understand the progressive part of this.
These guys catch a little slack from hardcores for having a slightly generic sound. They can be compared to a few other bands out there. However, I think they're cleaner. Vocally, they're better. It's an opinion. They're good.
We had the discussion a few minutes ago about the difference between 90s death metal vocals and current day death metal vocals, because I think technique has come a long way. Like you said, back in the 90s, you just had to figure it out, and what you had is what you had. These seem like practiced, like technically coached vocals. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Maybe not screamed 100%. You know, maybe they learned how to do this somewhat. In other words, what I'm saying is it doesn't sound like a mid-90s incantation style death metal vocal.
More controlled breathing.
Yeah. Diaphragmatic and very up and down. Growls and
Well,
screams.
listen,
everything
we'd
in
be
between.
lying if we said some of these guys did not take vocal lessons. We'd be lying. And listen, if you have metal in you and you take vocal lessons, you still have metal in you.
Yeah.
So there's that.
I'm sure it'll make you last longer.
For sure.
Your longevity will be better if you actually learn how to do it correctly.
Oh, for sure. I can sing like the growliest death metal singer out there for a song or three, and then I can't talk for 2 days, and that's the difference.
Oh, this is interesting. Drums and bass. Real choppy. See, to me, I am not a proficient musician in any way, but if I were to have to play this kind of music, I think I would need like a music sheet in front of me. You know, to remember all these parts. This is complex stuff. What time is this in? 1, 2, 3. No, 1, 2, 3. No. I don't know. I don't know. I can't figure it out.
Yeah, well, you break out the metronome and
Now we're back into a more traditional D-beat drum
right,
style
exactly.
here. Sweet picking in the background.
The main rhythm.
Probably multiple vocalists with them, I would think.
It sounds like it could be, as with our band Dying Fetus. They pull it off well, if so. These guys sound like they'd be great live. Once again, sounds like he has a great voice for going on a PA and broadcasting to many people.
Very energetic. You know, that's you bring up Dying Fetus, and death metal is a pretty wide category at this point, but none of the bands we've heard today do vocals like him, where he does that really like grunty pig sounding.
Both singers for Dying Fetus have amazingly thick, grunty, guttural sounds, and I would give them both credit for that, and that's probably why they're one of my favorites. Whereas, like I was saying before, I'm usually not at all a fan of dual singers. It works great for Dying Fetus.
Yeah. What do you think about like pig squeal death metal and or even cricket death? There's a whole sub-style where they just sing like crickets.
What if I said like this? I would rather listen to that guy from Disturbed doing all his ooh ah ah ah.
Really?
Yeah. It's a disgrace to me, but at the same time, I'm not discrediting anything they're doing.
I would listen to almost anything other than Disturbed. Oh, they're the worst. The worst. Have you heard these couple, speaking of gimmicks, we just listened to Animal Schoolbus that had the 2-year-old girl singer.
What do you mean? That was a gimmick?
I would think it has to be, but some of these gimmick bands that come out.
Hold on. That was a gimmick?
I think so.
Dude, that was crazy good.
Yeah, well, it's good, but I mean, it's, their claim to fame is that they got a little kid singer, but
I hope she's getting paid.
These nobody gets paid in death metal. These bands that came out that have like Caninus, you've heard them, right? They have dogs, pit bulls as singers, 2 of them, and Hatebeak, they have the parrot on vocals. And then there is one that has a cricket. I can't remember
Venom
what
with
they're
the chainsaws. Was it Venom? Yes, it was Venom.
Venom did the chainsaw thing. So that was Xenosis with Red Waves off of their album Sowing the Seeds of Destruction.
I'm not sure why they're not bigger right now. They really should be.
That's the newest band, the most contemporary band.
2014?
2015 it looks like.
Nice.
And that's the most contemporary band that we'll be playing today. But it does kind of show a progression. I mean, going way back to the first band that we played today, 85, listened to a lot of 90s today, and then we arrived here, and the production is entirely different. Some might not say better, because the clarity that comes with digital recording is sometimes a little too clean. But you could see that just everything has come so far. And if a band like Xenosis had happened in '95, they would have been on top of the world, with the amount of technicality you have. And not to say that, not to discredit Xenosis at all, but there's a lot of bands that are doing very similar stuff to that these days. And so bands like that don't tend to stick out, but that talent is.
Well, what if we took Xenosis and put them back in 1985 with the production value that they had?
Right. It would have been a lot less clear and muddy.
Thing to do with a lot of bands.
And I don't know how, I assume that a lot of these bands, like the band I'm in, we never record a song all the way through. We can't. We're not good enough. So like you get a part and you do like a verse, and then you get into the chorus and you drop a drumstick or something. You restart, but you could start without losing the first part. Back in the 90s, it's one take for the drums, one take for the guitar. So, some of these newer bands, I think, from using, so some of these newer recording technologies can come off sounding extremely tight and extremely technical, but maybe that's a product of the environment of the studio.
Well, I can attest to that, being back in the day with my, Foztex 4-track recorder.
Oh, yeah.
And, just not having the time. At the time, I had my brother and I on 6-string, and we didn't have a drummer. So anybody that drummed for us, they pretty much had to listen to a recording of my brother playing.
Yeah.
And then I would sing to all of that and put it on top of it. It makes a mess when you can just play it all live through. It's such a better sound. But then again, you have all the sound management to worry about.
Right. I mean, just different times. I was talking to Dave from Studio Wormwood, which is a studio up by Yukon, and he actually worked at Morrisound. So I mean, that's the mecca of death metal, like Morrisound in Tampa, right? That's all the greats came through Morrisound, and he's younger, so he wasn't there when a lot of that stuff was going on, but that's where he did his time, and so he really knows what he's talking about. And I brought this up with him, and I said, I noticed that a lot of the bands these days, they're getting younger and younger and better and better. They're super technical, super fast double bass, blast beats. You get like 18, 17-year-old kids that unbelievably fast and technical, and he agreed with that because he thinks that, because a lot of the computer stuff that's happening, the digital stuff that's making the recordings sound tighter and tighter, because the kids are listening to that. That's how they can play, and they're just adapting that. And he said a lot of these kids are like human metronomes, but at the same time, his criticism was that a lot of these kids lack what some of these old drummers had, which is a little bit of swing, a little bit of flavor, that maybe sometimes came in like Dave Lombardo. Not a perfect drummer, right? Some of these guys are not perfect drummers, but their little mistakes make them who they are. They give them character. And he suggested that a lot of these newer bands that are just, click to the grid all the way through, they lose some of that character because they are trying to play so precisely. What do you think about that?
I would 100% agree with that. And you see on stage playing live specifically, if I was that guy, that would mess up a little bit. Not necessarily mess up, change a bar, change one thing. It's so much easier to not get caught up in that moment and froze on stage and just keep going with the song.
Right. Maybe you can record an album digitally on Pro Tools that sounds perfect and it has a lot of processing afterwards and make it sound like that. And then you get on stage and if you need to bring a laptop out there with you, that's
Correct.
A problem.
Well, how many bands have you seen? I mean, there's a question for you. How many bands have you seen that were absolutely awesome albums, and then you went and they were a completely different, not necessarily worse or better, but a completely different band live? I think Iron Maiden's a great example of that.
Yeah?
100% different band live.
You think so?
Maybe not 100%. They're a hugely different band live.
You're saying worse?
No, way better.
Better.
It's possibly because you're getting caught up in the 12, 15-foot eddy running around.
Yeah,
maybe it's the pyrotechnics. Maybe it's the show. Maybe it's hearing Bruce. I don't know. It's a different show, though.
Maiden is unbelievable live, especially for their age.
For sure.
Just sprinting around. I mean, those guys have like a preseason training that they have to. They're just incredible live. But yeah, certainly there are bands that can sound impressive in the studio, but not pull it off live. And I think that's getting easier and easier. I mean, there are bands that are recording entire CDs in their bedroom, and it sounds great, but it's because they're using all those after effects and all the processing and coming out on the other side, maybe can't pull that off live.
Well, the term one-man band in today's world is absolutely attainable.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to give credit to those guys that can do. Have you heard Leviathan?
Yes.
Black metal band,
Mm-hmm.
probably, arguably the best American black metal band in terms of just originality and everything else. But he does everything by himself in his room, and actually he does a lot of it on electronic drums because he lives in an apartment and he can't play like actual loud drums. But he's put out like a ton of albums and side projects, and he can play everything, and it's super.
How much of that Dragon Force, how much of that is computerized?
I don't know.
Me either.
I believe that those guys are that fast.
I mean, cripes, they're flying.
I saw them live. I saw them with Killswitch, and they were impressive. They were better than Killswitch.
Though that's one of them bands. I mean, it won't be on my rotation of listening to, but if it's on, I'm not gonna change that song.
Yeah, I can't listen to Dragon Force or bands like that for very long. But I will say that seeing them live, they were really fun. I mean, the guy played a keytar.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it was funny because some of the guys, it was the Worcester Palladium. It's the people in the audience.
Greatest place ever.
It's nice.
Greatest place ever.
The people in the audience were there for Killswitch, so they were more of, I guess, I wouldn't say hardcore crowd, but they were more, I don't know, they wanted the harder stuff, and I could hear some of those grumblings, and I was just like, guys, just have fun. This is so fun to watch. I'm not a Dragon Force fan, but just they were having so much fun on stage and everything, and super fast. You got to respect that
For sure.
It's crazy.
I think some of my best favorite times were at the Palladium. A lot of great metal shows.
Yeah, Palladium still puts on good stuff. But you know what I forgot? I'm a little embarrassed of this. I forgot to play your jingle. So let's play the Death Metal Bob jingle. Does that sound good to you?
I'm taken aback by this, people.
That's your jingle.
Can we hear that one more time?
Hey, you want to hear it again? What do you think of the production value on that?
If you played that in the beginning of the show, I would have been way more pumped up.
Maybe we'll just have to redo the whole show over and make sure that we get that in there. Speaking of which, we are up to our last track of the day, and we jumped around a little bit chronologically because this band is actually still playing once a year, but they are definitely a 90s death metal band, and for my money, the best death metal band that ever came out of Connecticut. And I say that because I got to see them a bunch of times. And I remember seeing Tyrant Trooper open. Listen for this. This was a good show. I want to say 95. The Tune Inn in New Haven, small club. Tyrant Trooper played first, Machine Head, and then Napalm Death.
Oh, wow.
It was the last night of that tour, and it was pretty great.
Wow.
And I didn't know Tyrant Trooper at the time, and they came out. And the first thing they did is they had a TV on stage, and they played a video. Maybe you've seen this. It's a politician back in the 80s who got up on stage. He was given some kind of like public address, and he shot himself. Have you seen that?
Yeah. Just a quick side note. I don't know if you've ever heard the song "Hey Man, Nice Shot" by somebody sings that. Anyway,
yeah.
That's what that song's about. Yeah. Anyway,
really?
Carry on. Yes.
Oh wow. It was gruesome, but they came out and they played this on a TV, and then they went into their set, and it was the first time I had ever seen Tyrant Trooper, and they were incredible. And I remember liking that entire show. Machine Head played next. They were on their what was that album called? Davidian, or what was that? What was the album that was Davidian was from? They were on that tour cycle. I mean, it was like when they first came out.
Was it 95? Would have been Insane Sickness.
No, that's Tyrant Trooper. Machine Head.
Oh, I have no idea with Machine
Burn
Head.
My Eyes or whatever. And I liked him at the time, and now I can't stand him.
I never got into Machine Head.
Yeah, terrible. I could do a whole show about how much I don't like Machine Head. But then the great Napalm Death came on. It's when Barney had long hair and the whole thing was great. But anyway, to get back to Tyrant Trooper.
From Southington, Connecticut?
Southington, yeah. And they're still playing. They play a show every year in memorial to their guitarist, Ron, who passed away, but they're still together and they're still playing. And great band. This is Morbid Sacrifice by Tyrant Trooper off the album Insane Sickness, and it doesn't have a year on it. Oh, 95.
95.
And they were so good. Here we go.
Right away, you get a feeling crunchy, thick.
Too
And
low.
You just get that feeling like, oh, we're about to hear something here.
And these guys, before this, they were a thrash band. I think they've been together for quite a while, even before maybe back into high school. But
being a thrash band first is going to help tremendously with the instrumental, in my opinion.
yeah, because thrash tend to be technical, but you know what's interesting about Tyrant Trooper is that for a death metal band, they're not particularly fast. I mean, they had blast beats here and there, but they did groove right. They're about to jump into a groove part right here, and I wouldn't classify this in the same way that I would, say like Internal Bleeding,
First, right.
where there was just everything was just one mosh riff after another.
Tromping.
Right here. I remember this riff from seeing them live. It was great. But
That's a nice, thick riff. I like it.
but not the jun 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 jun, the kind of like second-rate Suffocation feel. Connecticut has always been known for mosh parts. Hatebreed and
Absolutely.
all that stuff, and these guys predated Hatebreed, but it just goes to show that moshing was always integral in the Connecticut scene.
It's not just death metal. It's not just metal. It's not just punk rock. People like to get crazy. And, I mean, just listen to this. When it's clean and it's crisp and it's brutal.
Right here. This is a mosh part right here. Intentional or not, super heavy. John Pucci on vocals. Haven't seen him in probably 20 years.
I'm pretty sure in 93 they had Moral Extinction, the album before this, and that would have been the one I was more familiar with than this, which I hadn't heard too much of.
Okay. Yeah, this is this is probably almost impossible to get the CD now, but if you can find a way to get a hold of it, it still holds up.
How about the artwork? On almost Man of War-esque a little bit, reminds me of.
Yeah. Very like Dungeons and Dragons, Tyrant Trooper guy with a big, skull and a T on his chest and stuff, and a sea of bones behind him.
A skull in the background. It's one of them. It's a simple picture, but there's a lot going on.
It's what you want from a death metal cover.
For sure. You want to look at it for a while. For you sissies that can't understand the vocals, you might want to read them.
Yeah, they actually have the lyrics here on the YouTube video. I had this on cassette because I didn't even have a CD player when this came out.
Yeah, heads up to 6 Morgoth 6 Bow Girl 6. Great YouTube page.
Thanks for the upload. Drawing a blank on his name right now, but the other guitarist who wasn't Ron is in 100 Demons now.
Nope. No clue.
You familiar with 100 Demons? Hardcore band out
I
of Waterbury.
believe you might have been you that pushed them on me, and I didn't really pay much attention to them.
Very metallic hardcore band out of Waterbury. Little D beat right here. Again, though, some blast beats with Tyrant Trooper, but never like a whole song that's just constant, A lot of dynamics. Whereas Evilution overall was a lot faster. Same era. Yeah, I like John Pucci's voice too. He goes up and down.
Lyrically, though, Evilution was more,
Blasphemous.
an intro, a middle, and an end. Whereas they're doing verses and running through the song.
Yeah, there's a structure to this. some of the lyrics here. Something to foresee. Cannibalism is the key.
Yummy.
Intestinal bowels of feed. Where will this addiction lead? So, closer to the Cannibal Corpse.
They have the
subject matter.
same Bible of horrible terms, I guess. Every death metal vocalist should have one. What would be your favorite? I mean, I tend to say the more, the more morbidly murderistic, blah, 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 anti-government type vocals. Where would you be on that?
I like the evil stuff. And I think, black metal really kind of owns the blasphemous side of, evil, diabolical lyrics at this point. But I think that's kind of more what I like. Getting back to Obituary, what I had heard about him is they never published his lyrics. And there were times that John Tardy didn't even write lyrics. He just, I guess he was just using his voice as an instrument. And sometimes you can make out certain words, but rather than actually sitting down and thinking something out, he just made noises.
For sure.
And to me, I respect that. I almost respect him more as if it was laziness, or him realizing that maybe he's just not good at poetry or something, and just making those noises. I respect that because it's funny. It's
if
cool.
you can do it well. What was that, an old band, Lucifer? I think they do a little bit of that too, just instead of a word or two.
Yeah. There are some good lyricists within the world of death metal, but it's almost like it's not what you're here for. It's usually the subject matter means less than the overall sound, right?
I like to hear my sixth string. I mean, you can tune it right up to a metal sound for me in my death metal. I like to hear it. I like it to be melodic, and I like the voice to sound crunchy, and it's got to be going somewhere.
Speaking of melodic and crunchy and doing all that stuff, band not from Connecticut, but pretty local from Providence, Vital Remains.
Okay, yes.
You ever hear Dechristianize?
I believe so.
It's a classic. I'm not going to play it on here because they were on a label and it's like a trademark thing. But look up Dechristianize. Glenn Benton does the vocals. It's a 10-minute song, and it sounds, when you listen to it, it feels like a 4-minute. Sometimes like long songs really drag on and stuff. It feels like a 4-minute song because it just grabs you, and it's super fast. And then the bridge is this really melodic, multiple guitar layered lead part by Dave Suzuki. It's incredible. You got to check it out. Dechristianize. It's a great song off a really good album. But anyway, DMB, Death Metal Bob. Let's hit your theme song here again.
I think this is my walking papers, guys.
Thanks for coming out today. This would have been a much more boring podcast if it had just been me speaking to myself.
Well, listen, I appreciate you having me. As always, anytime you want to talk about metal of any sort, I'm in 100%. And I got to say, you introduced me to a few new bands that I didn't even know were right in our precious state of Connecticut here. So, metal.
Always been a lot of metal in Connecticut, and, death metal is out there. And wait a minute. It looks like we have another call coming in. Hello, caller. Yes, this is the Southeastern Connecticut Metal Podcast. Is this the same guy we talked to before?
Shut up, Death Metal Bob.
Listen, don't you ever talk bad about Death Metal Bob.
Death metal.
DMB is not to be questioned. I don't know who you are. We're not going to have... I'm playing the song again. Sir, I'm playing the song again. The Death Metal Bob theme. We're going to drown out your ignorance. Again, I apologize for that guy calling. That was kind of weird and out of the blue. And
no, I'm just probably going to stay here in your closet now, but, no big deal.
But again, thanks to Death Metal Bob for being on the program today. Guys, if you have any requests for interviews or songs that you would like to hear played on this podcast, let me know. And otherwise...
Hey, listen, get out and support your local bands.
Of course. You got to get out there. You got to listen. You got to show up for the shows. You got to be part of the scene. Which I haven't seen Death Metal Bob in any shows recently, but anyway,
that's why I said it.
That's what we need to do. So again, Southeastern Connecticut Metal Podcast out.